Hey Flower Tribe, it's Kelly Lehman and Lucy Lehman, and today I would like to talk to you about fall pruning for your hydrangeas. If we haven't met yet, it's nice to meet you. My name is Kelly Lehman. I'm the owner of Cranbury Fields Flower Farm here in Cranbury, New Jersey, and I love giving you guys fun, free flower tips. So please feel free to subscribe to the subscribe button below, and also hit the bell notification so you know whenever I post another fun, free flower tip video. So let's dive right in. So it's fall, and one of the most popular questions that I get asked this time of year is, should I be pruning back my hydrangea plants? So I'm going to tell you the what's what behind fall pruning. So here's the short story with pruning your hydrangeas back. Most of the time you don't even have to. So I know there's like all these articles everywhere and all this chit chat about when should I prune it, I have to prune it. The real story is you probably don't even have to prune back your hydrangeas. And I have to tell you that like 90% of my hydrangeas here at the flower farm, I don't prune back unless they look like they're not producing flowers, they look like they're kind of pooped out, they might need a little recharge. Most years I don't prune them back at all, and I get gorgeous, gorgeous blooms. So if you don't feel comfortable that you're not sure what variety you have, or you just moved into a new home and you don't know which types of hydrangeas you have, and leave them alone. Just do yourself a favor and just let them come in and see if they even need to be pruned before you go down that road. And the other good news about not having to stress about your hydrangea pruning is that even if you prune back your hydrangeas wrong, you're probably not going to kill the plant. You might just not have a certain number of blooms the following season, and it's going to be just a lesson learned. So once again, don't stress over your flowers. I really feel like God put them here for us to enjoy and to bring us peace and to make us happy. So don't stress out. But here's the actual story about pruning, and we're in fall right now in my New Jersey garden, and we're a zone 6 planting area. So make sure that you know what planting zone that you're in, and make sure that you know what type of variety hydrangea that you have before you do the whole pruning game. I'm here with my Endless Summer Hydrangeas, and this is kind of like what they look like. And a lot of people want to know, should I prune these back? So the short answer is do not prune them back in fall, because what's going on with this Endless Summer Hydrangea is that it's actually starting to form next year's flowers already. So if you take a look inside this plant, you can see all sorts of new growth kind of forming on the old stems. There's all sorts of new buds forming. These are getting set in place now, and they are going to wind up being your blooms for next year. So if you come in here and you start pruning this plant back, you're going to be cutting off all of next year's blooms that are coming in on the old growth, because these stems are going to stay intact and they're going to wind up giving you the new blooms. So you want to stop yourself from doing any kind of pruning in fall or in winter or in spring, because like I said, you're going to wind up cutting off those new blooms that are going to come in next summer. Now the thing with Endless Summer is they also will have another influx of blooms that come in on new growth towards the end of summer. You don't have to worry too much about those. So here's the thing with hydrangeas that are similar to Endless Summer. They're going to come in on 2 batches of blooms. The first batch of blooms is going to come in the beginning of summer. And those are the blooms that were put in place on last year's growth. So you don't want to cut those down. However, Endless Summer will also give you another influx of blooms at the end of summer, and that's going to come in on something called new growth. So if you accidentally had already pruned back your Endless Summer Hydrangea, that's okay, because you're going to miss out on the first set of blooms, but your second set of blooms should still come in. So don't get nervous about this. But with the Endless Summer, hold back on pruning them in fall, because like I said, you might wind up cutting off that first influx of blooms that would have come in on the old wood that was set in place the fall of the previous year. So now let's go take a peek over at our Nico Hydrangea and our Limelight and our Annabelle, and I'll tell you the story behind those hydrangeas. So this is what my Nico Hydrangeas look like in fall, and the story with Nico Hydrangeas is they only come in on old wood. So the story with this hydrangea is that you do not want to prune this hydrangea back in fall or winter or spring, because in doing that, you're going to be doing the same thing as we talked about with the Endless Summer. You're going to wind up cutting next year's blooms off because they're already forming on this old wood that's put in place. So if you were to have pruned this guy back, you would have taken off all of these new flowers that are supposed to come in next summer. So if you do need to prune back your Nico Hydrangea, what you're going to wind up doing is waiting until, well, you're gonna have to wait until like next season already if you're watching this in fall. The best thing to do for pruning back your Nico Hydrangea is to wait until the flowers first come in, and then they start to fade a bit in summer, and then you can prune the plant back a bit in summer, like towards the end of summer. But you don't want to do any kind of pruning after, say, like August, like mid-August or late August, because that's when these new buds start to come in. So if you have to prune back a Nico, go ahead and do it then. But if you don't have to prune back your Nico, leave it alone. I'm a big fan of not pruning back more than I have to. So here we are in front of my Limelight Hydrangea, and the beautiful part about a Limelight Hydrangea is that it comes in on new growth. So you don't have to worry about things like cutting it at the wrong time. Am I going to be cutting off the new blooms that are on old wood? Because everything that comes in fresh on this plant next year, all the blooms will be coming from fresh stems that are put in place in spring. So most of my Limelight Hydrangeas I leave alone. I don't prune them back, and I just let them kind of come in on that new growth, and that's the end of the story. So I don't prune them at all. However, sometimes my Limelight Hydrangeas will look a little pooped out. I'll notice that I don't have as many blooms as I had the year before. And so sometimes every, say, like maybe like second or third or fourth year, I'll give it a pruning just to give it kind of like a revitalization or kind of like a recharge. And when I do that, I will wait until late winter or early spring. And what I'll do is I'll just like come in here and I'll cut back about 1/3 of the plant and leave the rest of it intact. And then I just find that I get like a little bit of a recharge. But know that if you prune back your Limelight Hydrangea, these floral heads that are already like really big are gonna be even bigger and more colossal and gorgeous, but it also might make the plant look a little floppier. So keep that in mind. So when you don't prune back a Limelight, you're gonna have smaller flower heads that are more delicate and beautiful, but they're still giant. I mean, Limelight Hydrangeas have like just giant flower heads in general, but they won't be quite as floppy. And so that's the story with your Limelight Hydrangea. Once again, if you don't have to prune back your hydrangea, I wouldn't. I would leave it alone. Sometimes simple is better. So this is what my Annabelle Hydrangea looked like in fall. And I used to be a big fan of pruning this back every year. And then one year I wound up missing the boat, and it was too late to prune them back, and they started blooming. And I wound up having beautiful, gorgeous blooms, even though I didn't prune it back. And I actually made a video showing you that, like what it looked like the before and the after, and I'll put a link to that in descriptions below. But what I also realized that when I didn't prune it back, my floral heads weren't quite so giant, which meant that they weren't flopping over as easily as they used to. And what I realized was in not pruning back these Annabelle Hydrangeas, I wound up leaving this base of old wood intact. So it has like this really sturdy base left intact. And then in the springtime, when those new growth blooms start coming up, because Annabelle flowers come in on new growth, as the new growth stems start coming up, this infrastructure kind of supports the plant, and it prevents it from flopping over as easily as it would have without this infrastructure. So I'm a big fan of leaving your Annabelle Hydrangea intact without pruning them back. And I would just kind of clean up around the base. You can do some deadheading if you like, which is basically just kind of clipping up some of the flower heads. Some people like to leave the flower heads intact though, for like the birds and the animals, for coverage for the winter. So either way is fine. So deadheading is fine, but you can leave this plant as it is without pruning and still get gorgeous flowers. Now, some people need to kind of manage the size of their Annabelle Hydrangea. And if you need to kind of cut it back and you want to keep a more tidier look, then the rule of thumb is I would really wait until like late winter, early spring to prune them back. But some people say it's okay to even do it late fall. Don't do it early fall. And what you're going to do is you're going to wind up just cutting it back to the ground about 18 inches. So if you do the 18-inch rule, it means you're basically going to come and just kind of prune it back to about like here. And once again, you're still going to kind of have like that woody structure to give it some support. If you leave at least 18 inches intact, you won't have as much support as if you didn't prune it back, but you'll still have a support system. Other people love to prune back their hydrangea, their Annabelle Hydrangea, all the way to the ground. And listen, I've read on some gardening blogs that that just works for them in their garden. So I would kind of experiment. Do 1 year where you don't prune them back at all and see if you love the look, because once again, you're going to have those smaller heads that are going to be like on sturdier, like a sturdier structure. And if you want those big, giant, colossal flower heads, you can wind up doing some pruning in late winter, early spring, or even like late fall. So try it out, see what works in your garden. Everybody's garden's different. Thank you so much for joining us in this video, and please let me know where you're viewing this from in this great, big, beautiful world. I love to see how our flower tribe is growing around the globe each week. And also please feel free to say hi to us over on our Cranbury Fields Instagram channel, and take a look at a free PDF file that I made for you in descriptions below. It talks all about 4 must-have flowers for your gardens. And I will see you in the next video.